I've been really disappointed by the ways that I've seen a lot of people making jokes about pedophilia and jokes out of pedophiles these days. And as a person who once got a pedophile arrested, I realize I've never really told that full story, and it's almost a decade since it happened. So I'm gonna try my best here to recount everything that went into reporting and getting a man arrested, even though he ended up never seeing a day in prison. My name is Maybe Burke, and you're watching Makeup for Lost Time. I always knew I wanted to, tell this story, so as it was happening, I literally kept a timeline of events that I have here in front of me that I'm going to try to use to tell, the full length of the story. Now, I've told bits and pieces of this story in different artistic formats, and actually the story of reporting him actually starts the first time I presented a piece about him for a public audience. The first short play that I wrote was called Do You Want Me to Stop? And the night that that was first performed was also the night that I called my dad to explain the situation to him. Okay, wait, let me back up and explain why we're even reporting him, because it was 8 or 9 years since at least it started. And I admittedly had not had contact with this man for several years before we decided to report it. But I'm saying we because a friend of mine came forward with me because he was in the same boat with this man. And this friend texted me one day a screenshot of a social media post where the man that we were reporting, I guess I have to give these people names. Do I give him his real name? I mean, if you look it up, you can find out who he is. A lot of people know his name, so I guess we're just using the real name. So my friend sent me a social media post of Kevin where he had just gone on a cruise with an 18-year-old boy. And now you might be thinking that's not too big of a deal. The kid's 18, he's legally an adult. That's not pedophilia. But if he's bringing this kid on a cruise at 18, how long have we been together? How long has this been happening before we got to that point? And if you do some digging on social media, like I of course did, he would go to his, recitals at school. I think the kid was in band, and the kid didn't seem to have a parental figure who was, supporting them and going to these things, so Kevin would go to those things. And that might sound just like a nice, neighborhood friend kind of a thing to do, but I know this man, and that's not what this was. So in an attempt to protect that kid and honestly stop this from happening with other kids, my friend and I decided to finally go through with reporting this man. We had considered doing this a couple of times prior. I mean, it was always kind of looming in the back of my mind. But I think for me, I didn't really realize that I outgrew him. He didn't outgrow this. I had actually kind of tactfully pissed him off to the point where he stopped wanting to engage with me, because I met him when I was 14, I think, and my interactions with him lasted probably until I was at least 20 years old, at which point I kind of set myself free in a way. But I also think that I was aging out of being exciting for him. I hate talking about this. I hate how I have to talk about the words I have to say to talk about this. So yeah, whatever. My friend and I finally decide it's time to go through with reporting him. Whatever happens, at least we know we tried. And that's when I decided I had to call my dad, which doesn't necessarily feel like the right first move for a lot of people, but I was under a very unique circumstance because my father is a retired cop and once was actually the head of sex crimes in my county. So in general, I would want to let people in my life know that this was happening before they just hear about it in the news or the rumor mill that was very strong on Long Island. But also really for my father's benefit, I didn't want him to get a call or see a colleague and have them be like, so about your kid's rape case. I felt like he deserved to hear it from me first. But the problem was, my father and I were not really on great terms at this point. I had recently changed my name, and he was in his feelings about that a little bit. So we actually hadn't spoken for a little bit, and I was actually kind of waiting for the dust to settle on that before I brought this up. But shout out to my friend E. We should all have a friend like E. We were talking about it one night, and she literally, like, took my hands and she was like, maybe call him. Show him that there are more important things than what he's currently upset about. Don't put off, like, a major life moment for you because of this. And so the night that Do You Want Me to Stop was first produced, I called my dad and explained to him what had happened. Which is, like, never a thing you want to do. You never want to call your father and be like, hey, remember that stage manager from the teen theater I used to work at? Yeah, he used to touch me. And also, like, as my dad, he probably never wanted to get a phone call like that from one of his kids. But we had to do it, unfortunately, in order to do what I had to do. That phone call had to happen first. For me, for my heart, for my relationship with my father, I had to get that part out of the way. I actually don't remember the order of telling my parents. I do remember that my mother and I had a conversation about it in person when I was at the house once. I'm assuming after I called my dad. I don't really remember that part. Maybe it's on here somewhere. Oh yeah, no. My mother doesn't show up until later in this timeline. All I remember is my mother having to leave the room to go throw up while we had the conversation. With my father, it was a little different because it was, like, weirdly close to work for him. Not to say that it wasn't personal for him at all, but it was, like, conversations he kind of knew how to have. And he actually told me, I didn't know, but I was, like, months away from my statute of limitations running up, which really means my friend E was right. If I had waited until my father and I's relationship was healed, I would have not been able to report him at all. Because at this point, I'm 22, about to turn 23, and in New York, or at least on Long Island where I was reporting it, you have 5 years after you've turned 18 to report things that happened when you were a minor. So timing did just, like, weirdly work out in my favor that I processed things and I was, like, ready to report this by the time I was about to lose out on my opportunity to. And this is where my experience is a little bit completely unique because of my father's relationship to the police and all of this. I was living in New York City, but of course had to go back to Long Island to report this because that's where it happened. And so I didn't actually go to a police station. My dad set up a meeting with a detective. And then one day I went out to my parents' house and met with the detective there, which actually is pretty common for, like, victims that were minors. They actually have abandoned houses that they will bring people to if there's not, like, a comfortable house for them to be in. Mostly because, especially if you are still currently a minor, going to a police station and having to do this can be, like, really traumatizing. And so they try to give you a space where you can be a little more comfortable in your own home, but understanding that some victims are reporting people who live in those homes with them or frequent those homes, or they don't feel comfortable around the people they are home with. There's also other options for them. Bold of me to think I can do my makeup while telling this story. Oh, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I had that phone call with my dad. I remember I was literally walking through Central Park while I called him, and we had the whole conversation, and I think he kind of quickly switched his brain into, like, work mode, and he started talking about how we were going to make a plan. I remember I requested a woman to report to, and he was like, yeah, a lot of people want that. And I was like, yeah! Is that not clear why? And I will say, besides my father, I almost exclusively had to talk to women during this, which was calming for me, I think, in a lot of ways. Not that I wouldn't be able to talk to a man, but especially as a young trans femme, I was very early in my transition. I was very non-conforming at the time. There was just a lot that came into the conversation outside of the details of what actually happened. And I just kind of needed to feel a little more comfortable like that. So it was a Saturday when I called my dad to explain this to him. The Sunday, I spent some time reaching out to the other people I knew had gone through this, not reporting him, had been abused by him, because he was kind of a serial offender, and so I did know about several other people who had been with him, and or people who had sent him pictures, or at least he ended up getting pictures of. That's not like the rumor mill. A large part of this was photography that existed, which I don't even think I actually talked about and reported in my report. But a lot of the ways that he was effective with me was sending me pictures of boys that were my age. Which at the time I didn't really like think about too deeply, but now I'm like, oh, that means you had like hard drives full of underage boys without their clothes on. Oh, it was a Friday that I called my dad. Saturday I spent contacting these other victims. I already had that one friend that decided to come forward with me, and so we knew that the two of us would be reporting this. But my dad said, and it is true, you have a stronger case if there's a pattern of behavior and you can prove it happened with more than one person. So I reached out to everyone I knew of, and some people I like strongly suspected something had happened with. And I got a range of responses, from no response, people ignored me, to certain people were like, I don't feel comfortable doing this, I don't want to relive this. And some people were like, I actually didn't have this happen to me, I'm so sorry it happened to you. Although whether or not I believe those people is up for grabs. And everybody had their own response, and I don't fault anybody for not wanting to come forward with us, because we all were adults at this point. I didn't know the kid that was in that social media post. I didn't reach out to anybody who was currently a minor because I didn't know those people. But nobody decided to come forward with us. It was just me and the friend who initially decided to go forward. And so I spent Sunday, the next day, on social media doing some like sleuthing to make sure I had a solid understanding of his age, my age when we met, all of those things. Because details and facts are really important in something like this. So I've had him blocked on social media for years. We went on my friend's social media, and actually another friend that I was texting ended up actually like finding his birth date and figuring out the details for us. So after this really weird weekend of researching my abuser and his other victims, I met with the detective Monday morning. And so this is now August 3rd I meet with the detective. And it's worth noting, the reason I had hesitated calling my father was because he was responding poorly to me having changed my name. So when the detective came in and she said, "Hi, maybe," it was actually the first time that I had known my father had said my name, because he told her the right name. So as if having to meet this woman who is a stranger and explain to her the ways that a man abused me and groomed me and took advantage of me as a child, as if that wasn't enough, I was also going through the like emotional moment of my father using my name for the first time through this colleague of his. It's a whole mess of emotions. And so I tell her the story in the fullest detail that I know how, and I'm going to spare you actually all of the details of what happened way back when, because I don't want to like re-traumatize anybody who might have similar experiences here. But we talk about how it happened, where it happened. I show her parts of the neighborhood where he would pull over in his car with me. I show her the places he would pick me up late at night when I would sneak out of my parents' house. And then she talks to me about next steps. The next step being she comes back 2 days later and records a phone conversation between me and Gavin. And like, I don't know that I've ever had a phone conversation with this man before. We had been on AOL Instant Messenger, that's how long ago this story is. We had texted, we had IM'd, but I had never called him on the phone that I could remember, so I was like, this is gonna be a weird experience, Because not only have I never spoken to this man on the phone, we haven't spoken at all in years, and there was literally a device on my phone where they were recording the conversation for the police. And I have a complicated relationship to police at this point. I'm starting to understand myself as kind of an abolitionist, and also working within this system to try to protect communities. There's a lot of complication. There's a lot of feeling and confusion here. But 2 days later, she comes back to my house. She tries to call my friend who's coming forward with me, but he missed the call, I think. But he did give me Kevin's phone number because I didn't have it anymore because I had blocked him years ago. And the detective kind of coached me through what the conversation should look like. Basically, I had to convince him to talk about it so we could get a recorded confession, basically. This might be the place where my theater training came the most in handy in my life, because I can't imagine this being the go-to next step with the average victim who's reporting this. That feels wild to me, especially knowing that this is also the first step they take when a minor is reporting something like this. And so I basically call him and do, as I was told, try to guilt him into talking about the thing. I don't remember the exact verbiage I used, but it basically was I've been thinking a lot about what we used to do together and having a lot of feelings about it, and I just need you to confirm for me that this happened. I now know from living this story that he was ready to confess, and so he did end up saying on the phone, "I was aware that you were underage and I took advantage of you and others." Which at the time felt like the strangest victory. The cop was literally celebrating across the table from me, but I was that's not a good thing. So we have a recorded confession from him talking about other people as well, which is really important for our case. And then the detective calls my friend from my phone because he didn't pick up when she had called from hers. And they make a plan of when to meet, but is going on vacation to visit his mom because she lives in another state. So I forget when they actually scheduled it for, but it was in the future. That was August 5th. I called Kevin, detective called my friend, and we got a recorded confession and set up a time for my friend to also report his side of the story. Then on August 17th, which I'm guessing is 2 Mondays later, I got a call from the precinct that they were going to reschedule his meeting with the detective. And this is where this starts to read like a Lifetime movie a little bit, because the detective is kind of AWOL. We haven't heard from her, and my friend is actually flying back to Florida because his mom is dying and she's in critical condition and he needs to go say goodbye to her. As if we needed more emotions to be involved in all of this. So we didn't hear back from the detective. She was going to call him to reschedule. She never did. So this is where my dad starts to get involved again, because he has connections, obviously. And he calls the precinct to figure out what's going on. And he learns that the detective just had heart surgery and she's going to be out for 2 weeks. But she puts this case on hold because when my dad came and was like, my kid needs to report something, she was about to retire, apparently, and put off her retirement to work on this case because she knows my dad and she was like, we want the best on this team. So she was holding on to this pretty strongly, which I think is a good thing overall, but also like put off our getting results, because she was putting off this meeting with my friend for another 2 weeks. I had already been waiting like 2 or 3 weeks at this point for a result, or for an update, or anything, whatever. But the next week on Wednesday, my friend finally got a call that he was meeting with the detective next week. So this is already bringing us into September, when I first reported this August 3rd. Which, I mean, the system is the system, and so I don't know how these timelines normally go, but we have a second victim who hasn't even told their side of the story, and it's a month later. Now, we grew up doing musicals. That's how we met this man. He was stage managed the musicals that we were in as kids. And Nick was still performing in musicals and was doing one at this time. I saw the show September 5th on a Saturday. Thursday, September 10th, Kevin went to go see the show. And I actually don't have this marked on here, but I should figure out where in this timeline it happened. But my friend's mom did die. And so he's doing this musical kind of in the midst of grief. And I love my friend. It was an incredible performance, and knowing what he had been going through, it was incredibly hard to watch. So my friend finally gets the meeting with the detective and reports his version of what happened. And that night, September 11th, oh, that's a day, Kevin sees his show. And I can't imagine what that's like emotionally for my friend. Kevin sent my friend a text the next morning, which I don't know if he really didn't know what was going on after that phone call with me, but he wrote this long text congratulating him for the performance and also saying, "I'm so sorry about your mom. I didn't know until I saw it in the program last night." But just like the fact that this man still thinks he can have relationships with us is wild to me. So after the show, after my friend reports this, like, we don't hear back about it for quite a while, actually. So I called my dad because he was, like, weirdly my point of contact for this whole thing. And he had spoken to somebody else in the precinct earlier that day and learned that the detective's husband was diagnosed with cancer after she met with my friend and he reported it. And so she took even more time off of work after her heart surgery. This is where, like, the Lifetime movie, like, of her life is wild. She put off her retirement to deal with this case, and then, like, health scare after health scare between her and her husband. Wild. I can't imagine. But apparently at this point she is back to work and she's, like, catching up. So now it's December 30th. The detective calls me and tells me they can't find Kevin. They went to go arrest him at his home, at his work, and they can't find him. He has an apartment that is, like, where his address is listed as, and so they went to the apartment 4 times and never found him there. They went to the post office, and the post office said that they had never delivered mail to his name at that address. They went to his work. He's not at work. But on social media, they saw that he was planning to see another show that Saturday, and they were planning to arrest him there. And I don't actually remember or know how it happened earlier, but on October 1st, which was the Thursday of that week, he was finally arrested. So it's October when we're finally actually addressing this. He gets arrested October 1st. On the 2nd, there's a Newsday article about it. The article actually said at the bottom, the gender of the victims was not released, which, as a non-binary person, felt like actually they don't know how to talk about the gender of the victims. And that day, like within 24 hours of his arrest, he made bail. $30,000 cash, he made bail. Which, like, I've been to his house, like, when he lived with his parents. He was not incredibly well off. Like, most people don't have $30K lying around, which means he knew he was getting arrested. He knew what that phone call was. He was ready. And in all reality, somebody in his family probably bailed him out. But they were ready. He spent less than 24 hours in jail. And yes, jail is different from prison. Like, I learned a lot about the criminal justice system in doing this, and knowing that he actually never spent a day in prison and only spent less than 24 hours behind bars is wild for what he did. So an article comes out about it, obviously, like, it's in the news, it's public knowledge at this point, and there's a grand jury scheduled for Wednesday.